So I just got home from volleyball, and I realized that I totally forgot to film my video this morning. Granted, I did do some meaningful work this morning. I had my singing lesson. We worked on putting the chords down so that I could do my recording session, which actually went pretty well overall. And then I was reviewing the songs that I had submitted to be professionally mastered so that I could maybe get better sound quality that I could create than I could create on my own. But yeah, I totally forgot to do my video. Now, I remembered now, but in all honesty, it seems totally possible that I could have just forgot. And I don't like that. And it's true that I haven't been treating this as the highest item on my priority list. But I think it's important. Just for keeping me consistent and for documenting the journey as I build from here. So it's definitely something I could do better with. And I know how much room for improvement there is. And while overall I had a really good day, it's true that there are just things that I'm not doing enough of. And I've also had to confront the strategy that I laid out for how I was going to do my singing lessons and my recording sessions is not really going to be practical in reality most work days. Unless I have a day like today where I don't have to go in super early. Even super early for me is not early. I work more in the afternoon, in the evenings on purpose so that I can take care of my work. But part of it too is I just need to go to bed way the fuck earlier. That's part of with volleyball tonight of where I'm kind of treating it as the one last test to see if I will actually get some decent rest. And if I do not, then I just need to stop playing volleyball at night, period. But even outside of volleyball, my sleep has just not been great. Some of that is from factors that are slightly outside of my control, or at least I don't know what levers to pull to influence them yet, such as like having just really crazy dreams all night, which has happened to me since I was a kid, but there are times that it's worse than others. And some of those are things that are completely within the scope of my control, like just being up way too late. And yes, I work afternoons into evenings, and yes, there are times that I don't get home from like working and then working out after until more like 8:39, but still, like, I can absolutely get to bed earlier than I have been. There's so much room for improvement here. And sleep is the foundational thing. Granted, I'm still doing a lot better overall with it than I have at different parts of my life, but that also is in some ways where my work in the morning is suffering right now. And not even relative to what it was before, because in all honesty, I've actually been much more consistent recently than I had been in the time period immediately preceding that. But I've had previous time periods in my life where I've just been extremely consistent in the morning. And so I think there's opportunity there that I'm not making the most of. And there's a huge difference between like having to be at work at noon and waking up at 9:30 or 10 and not really having a window where I can just sit down and focus on doing meaningful work versus waking up at like 7:30 and having some pretty solid time there. It makes a huge difference. And so that's where there's some serious opportunity. And an experiment that I'm running from here is I'm going to be weighing in and tracking my protein and tracking my bedtime every day. And I think if there are 3 simple metrics to track, those are pretty solid ones. and as far as like optimizing my physical health and the goals that I have, there's not going to be any perfect proxy for that. But generally, if I'm going to bed at consistent times, especially times that are consistent with when I need to be waking up, and then I'm making sure that I'm getting enough protein, and in my case, I'm trying to build muscle, so gaining weight slowly, but still, like, those are basically the variables that I need to track to make sure that everything is moving in the correct direction. So I know that I'm absolutely capable of everything that I need to do. And not even theoretically, like I've seen myself work my ass off for really extended periods of time. And even lately, I've been doing pretty good, but I need to get more structured. So what does that actually look like? What's the difference between what I'm doing right now and what I need to be doing? I'd say there's still time which doesn't really have a whole lot of tangible direction. Meaning, let's take music for example. I find working on music very meaningful. I find putting my songs together to be one of the most rewarding things that I can do. I think that that particular pursuit is on a very short list of things that I can do right now that can actually positively impact the lives of people at a fairly large scale right now. And some people would underrate the importance of music. I think I've even been guilty of doing that myself at times, just like getting my head too filled up with like big picture systems change, which is extremely important, but missing the sense of how it all fits together. And so I've had my life changed by the music that's shaped me. The soundtrack to my life, so to speak, has really been a huge part of helping me become who I am. And I think it's a mistake to undervalue that, for one. And then for two, even just from the perspective of building community and reaching people, ignoring the intrinsic value of the music itself, I think that there's a huge opportunity there to connect us with like-minded people. And so I'm excited about it from that perspective. And then even just selfishly, for me, it's really fulfilling and also, I don't know if I have a perfect word for it, but like validating in the sense that it helps me feel understood. And so I understand that my time is scarce, and I understand that I can't do everything. On the short list of things that I absolutely believe are worth doing, music is one of those items. That being said, some of the things that I do working on music are very tangibly moving the needle in the direction of what I'm building. So like doing the recording sessions is an example of that. There's not really any way around that. I think there's a lot of time that maybe to some extent is kind of necessary, but ends up being rather fluffy, like just listening to a lot of what I've created over and over and over again without being nearly as analytical about it as I could be. And so it's not to say that I can't or that I shouldn't listen to it and enjoy it. I think that is worthwhile too, but especially with my time in the morning where I just have a limited window of having my bubble of focus, I really need to make that time count. And I'm happy and excited to apply that time in the direction of creating music, but not of just kind of dancing around creating music. And I'm not saying that that's most of what I've been doing. It definitely isn't. And I have some actual tangible output to show for that, but I could do better. right? And then in conjunction with that, preparing for the failure to launch video, which is at this point about like 60 something days away. Absolutely doable, but I do need to be mindful of that. It's not going to be at the top of my list focus wise for this month, but continuing to get some clarity on how I want to frame that, building out the script, and really going into it as prepared as I can be. And then thinking about how to actually get my music out to the world and structuring the videos that I want to create for it. There's a lot of work to be done. And I'm capable of doing it. But I need to have more structured systems of like, okay, this is what work actually is and what actually needs doing versus this is something that kind of feels adjacent to work. And so it's easy and I can justify it as work in my head, but it's not really what needs to be done. So that's part of the equation. And then the other part of it is just front loading my hours. Like I was about to grab my laptop and go sit down and start doing some, like, basically getting the tracks that just got mastered out and submitted. But I'm like, nope. I think the more important thing that I can do right now than getting those uploaded immediately is just establish the habit of not touching my laptop when I get home from work. Because the sooner that I go to sleep, the sooner that I can wake up, and front loading my time in the morning is going to be so much more effective for me. At least in the context of my life and my work. And so that's what I need to do. It's already, 10:44? So it's not like I'm going to be going to bed super early, but last time I played volleyball, I was up till 4 a.m. And honestly, like, it was really fun. I enjoyed it, but it's not worth that trade-off. This time, it was not quite as fun as last time. It was still fun, but I'm also just like, I really do enjoy it. I really do like playing. I like having that sense of community. I do have some friends there, but when I think about the list of activities that are worth staying up till 4 a.m. for, that's a short list, and I don't think volleyball makes the cut, in all honesty. At least not for me. At least not at this time of my life, right? And so, but that being said, that's part of the experiment that I'm running tonight. Is like, do I actually have to stay up till 4 a.m. because I played volleyball? Like, yeah, to some extent, it does get the adrenaline going. But like, there are times that I played volleyball and been exhausted and just like passed out, like couldn't even move, right? So I don't think it's a given that I have to be awake. I think that's a narrative that I invented. But I will say that there is some truth to the idea that it's going to disrupt my sleep cycle, because if I'm used to getting home at, like, let's call it 9 at the latest, it's pretty rare that I get home from work later than 9 most days. And from volleyball, I don't get home until like 10:30-ish, and then still have to eat, shower. It's a disruption for sure. Now, if I normally fall asleep at, let's say, like 11 o'clock, which has been like, that would be better than where I've been at recently. But let's just say that was what I was normally achieving. And then volleyball, it's like 1 a.m., just as a hypothetical. Would that then be worth it? I don't know. That'd be closer, but still probably not. And it's hard for me to conceive of a realistic situation where I'm falling asleep much earlier than 1 a.m. getting home from volleyball. I'm not saying that's impossible, but that just strikes me as unlikely. I don't have a super hard time falling asleep these days, at least relative to where I was at, especially in my adolescence, but it still takes me some time. And there are some nights that it takes longer than others. So, yeah, lots of opportunity for improvement. And that will always be true, right? And I also struggle to find the right balance of appreciating how far I've come and the meaningful work that I have done. Like, if you told me 6 weeks ago that this is where I was at right now, I'd be like, dude, that's fucking insane. And I'd be really happy. I am really happy in a lot of ways. But me today, seems like, okay, like, there's still a lot of meat on the bone, so to speak. And I can't have that time back. So I'm never going to be perfect with it, but the better and better that I can get. And then as far as these videos, I think this is a very worthwhile thing for me to do. I've had some really good feedback from some close friends of mine on how to make them better. I think that I have not really integrated much of that yet at all. Part of it is that I'm still trying to figure out exactly how I want to apply it, but much like the overall philosophy of these videos, it's like just start doing it and then you learn. So I do want to work on making my lighting and my camera setup much more consistent. I want to start integrating a little bit more of the fitness side of my life into some of these videos, and I think that that's a good way to make it helpful for people. But overall, I do feel as though I'm in a really good place, and I've made a lot of progress recently. And the more that I zoom out, the more obvious that becomes, right? When I look at today, I'm like, man, I could have done this and this and this better. When I look at the last few years, it's like, okay. I've done some really fascinating work. I'm not going to say impactful yet, but I think a lot of the work that I've done will kind of serve as the origin story for some of the more impactful work that I am building towards. But I hate that idea of even just saying building towards. Like, why not just doing? What the fuck do I mean by that? Like, but then do I believe that what I'm making with music is impactful? And I think to some extent, yes. True, it is not the same as like actually helping build better systems of governance, and but they're both worthwhile, and I see them as more interconnected than would probably make sense to anybody else, and at least at this stage. Maybe I'm delusional, right? I think I've certainly been very delusional about many things at previous points in my life, and I think it would be delusional for me to assume that I'm delusional about nothing at this stage of my life, right? But I do see music as a very worthwhile pursuit for the reasons that I expressed earlier, and again, even just from a community building perspective, I think there's a lot of value to it. And probably most of the people who listen to the music that I create aren't going to be all that interested in what we're building with Blueprints, but maybe some will, right? And it doesn't take that many people, right? Say that I reach 100,000 people on Spotify, which is not that big. Like 100,000 monthly listeners on Spotify is not nothing, but there's tons of people who have reached that threshold, and there's no reason why that's unachievable for me over the next couple of years. Like that seems totally doable. Let's say 1% of those click through and become somewhat interested, or like, let's say 10% of those click through and look at the Learning Every Moment and Big Plans, and then 10% of those, so 1% of the total, like actually become engaged in that community. Well, that's 1,000 people who are like probably pretty intelligent and thoughtful and really care about making the world a better place. And like, what can we build? I don't know, but something. And it's hard because I look out at the world and see all of the problems that we have, and it seems like a lot of things are like kind of just crumbling down around us. And my capacity for putting my hands on the dials of macro geopolitical issues that are happening right this second is near zero. But my capacity for just slightly nudging the direction of humanity long term over the coming decades and centuries, I don't know what it is, but I think it's more than 0. And so, more than 0 is good enough for me. And I would rather give it everything I got while living meaningfully in the present. And that's kind of the difference of where I'm at right now versus where I was at a few years ago, of where I genuinely was working my ass off, and I really believed I was doing the most important work that I was capable of doing. And maybe I was in some ways, but it was very short-sighted. I wasn't doing it in a way that was sustainable. There were a lot of things about my process that were just completely misguided. And I think that while my intentions were good, my actual execution being in, like, as close to isolation in my work as I could really get. Don't get me wrong, I was learning from other people, but I wasn't really collaborating with anybody, to some extent because I felt like I couldn't. And I think I should elaborate on that. I felt like I couldn't because I felt like I needed to do the work and prove myself and prove my value first, to some extent. I wouldn't say that's the only thing, but that was probably the main thing. And I'd rather learn in public now and just use this channel as an opportunity to give anybody who wants to a chance to get to know me a little bit. And I don't think that should be obligate for anybody, but I'm pretty biased. I think I've had a very unique life, which I will talk about. Like, I keep saying that, but I haven't actually told my story on here yet. And I do think that I'm in the process of building some things. More specifically, some systems, some communities, and the connection between those systems and communities that will matter to a lot of people. And so that's where I describe a lot of these as a time capsule. Like, who's watching this right now? Maybe a couple people I don't know, but mostly the people who already know me and already love me and care enough about me to watch this rambly video journal, right? And so, and I appreciate you. I really do. But longer term, this is a frozen distillation of this moment in time. And I kind of see this as telling the story of my life, telling the progression of my journey frame by frame. And I don't envision it as being something that, like, somebody wants to go back and watch every video of. That doesn't really make any sense to me. But I do think that with, like, the new AI tools that are going to exist over the coming years, there are some interesting applications for this. And just the act of doing it for me is useful. But just me putting it all out there and saying, like, this is who I am, this is what I'm building, this is why. And we're figuring out the how together, because I sure as hell don't know. But, like I said before, success is not guaranteed, but I think the chance of having a really meaningful impact is more than 0. And we live at an incredibly precarious time, but it's also a time of insane opportunity. Like, more opportunity than, for most of us, most of our, like, almost the entirety of, well, I was going to say, like our whole family line before us, but that also doesn't really make any sense, because to try to separate ourselves out, like we are the direct consequence of the people who've came before us, to like evaluate our opportunity independent. Okay, now I'm just rambling. I gotta go eat some food and try to get to sleep as soon as I can, but I really do love you, and I'm gonna do my best to show you with my actions. How's that sound?